So until 1976 in this country and the passage of the 1976 Copyright Act, only stuff that was actively copyrighted was copyrighted. So you had to send a copy to the Library of Congress, pay a small deposit fee. It was actually kind of burdensome. It needn't have been. That was just a function of government bureaucracy. But one of the effects of this is that almost everything that we did that wasn't part of an industrial act of creation was not covered by copyright law. You know, your kids' napkin doodles were not covered by copyright law unless you sent them to the Copyright Office, which would have been crazy. Since 1976 and the American accession to the Berne Treaty, we have lived under a very different world where everything is copyrighted from the instant of its creation. And what that means is that just as digital technology was starting to rise and the act of copying became something that you did a million times before breakfast, copying itself became subject to all these rules. And there's no easy way to opt out of that system. In fact, offering people a license that says, do what you will with this on a cultural basis, but if you want to treat me as an industrial actor, we need to negotiate a contract, required paying lawyers hundreds of dollars or even thousands to write that license, and then the person on the other side would have to pay hundreds or even thousands of dollars to interpret them for it and make sure they're on the right side. Creative Commons set out to kind of take the lawyers out of the equation and make opting out or partially opting out simpler. So the Creative Commons licenses are standardized licenses. They exist in something like 81 countries now, and they're compatible across the world. Because this is the other thing, is that while copyright law treaties guarantee that copyright creators get the same minimum rights in every country, they don't say anything about the minimum rights of users in every country. So every country has different rules about what teachers, archivists, people who provide access to disabled people, and just people engaged in the public square can do with copyrighted works. So Creative Commons has harmonized all that through these licenses. And what you do is when you create a work that you want to share, you go to creativecommons.org and you're presented with a very simple screen that gives you a few options for the terms on which you'd like your work to be shared. The first one is whether you want to allow commercial activity or prohibit it. And then the second choice is whether you want to allow people to make new things out of the work or whether they're going to be required to only copy the work verbatim. And then the last one is if you're going to allow people to share your work, or to make new things from your work, do you require them to make their new works available on the same terms? So in other words, I made a movie. If you want, you can cut a new movie out of it, but you have to allow other people to cut new movies out of that. Now, Creative Commons has been very widely adopted. There's something like 250 million Creative Commons licensed works that have been put on the internet since 2003 by creators all over the world. And there are search engines like Google and Yahoo, the Flickr search engine, and so on, as well as huge repositories of Creative Commons licensed works that are freely usable under the terms of these licenses and can be freely mixed. You can take a bit of audio from Israel, a bit of text from France, a bit of still stuff from the UK, and some writing from America, and you can combine them knowing that all these creators have given permission, and knowing that even though they all labor under different legal systems, that those legal systems have been harmonized for you. The Creative Commons licenses are expressed in very plain language. So there's a kind of lawyerese version that embodies all the technical stuff. And then there's a legally accurate summary in a few bullet points that you can literally read in about 10 seconds that explains in terms that are meant to be interpreted by average people what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And they also come as a machine-readable license. So when you go through the Creative Commons licensing process, you're given a little text that you can paste into your web page or that you can put into the metadata for your video or audio or stills that express the terms of the license so that search engines, you can go to a search engine and say, find me text that's Creative Commons licensed for commercial reuse. And it can parse those three things. It's text, it's Creative Commons licensed, it's commercially usable. Find those materials and give you a list of them. And that's a really exciting development in the way that the world has progressed. And people have used Creative Commons licenses in a lot of different ways for a lot of different purposes because, of course, we create for all kinds of reasons. In my case, I use a really wide variety of CC licenses. My books, are all published under Creative Commons license. These days, it's always Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike, which is to say you can copy them provided you do so non-commercially. You can make new works out of them, but you have to share those works under the same terms. But my photos, because I take a lot of pictures, I always travel with a camera in my pocket, but I'm not a photographer. They're all just CC attribution. So you can just use them, provided you say who made them. And so they found their way into national newspapers, into galleries, into people's media, into books and coffee table books, magazines, and so on. It's cool. And also innumerable projects, just people's school projects, people's net projects, whatever. It's great. I benefit from lots of other people whose stuff are CC licensed. They benefit from mine. It's a lovely virtuous circle. And then for my speeches, because I do a lot of public speaking, if I have a transcript or if I have detailed notes, I make those available usually under a public domain grant, which is not a license because you can't license the public domain, but it's a grant that says, I abjure all ownership of this. It's yours. Just do with it what you will. Treat it like Shakespeare, right? You do anything you want with it. Treat it like a cave painting. And that's great. And those things have found their ways into even more places and have really commercially been very successful for me too, because it's gotten me tons of speaking work, because that kind of this is free in all regards gives it such a fitness factor for reuse. People are like, wow, I literally have to think not at all about what I do with this before I do it, except to make it as good as it is for my purposes. I don't have to think at all about what the creator wants. And I've even had it, when you get spam, sometimes there's like a word salad of random text from the internet that's supposed to fool your spam filter at the bottom of the message. I had an editor email me once and say, I got a spam and it had this really interesting text at the bottom, and I Googled it, and it was a speech that you gave. Can I buy the text of the speech to put in my magazine? I'm like, well, it's in the public domain. He's like, I feel better if I could pay you. How about $1 a word? So I got, an extra sort of $5,000 out of this spammer. I sometimes call it thinking like a dandelion. We as mammals, I'm a mammal with a kid. I've got a little 17-month-old baby. We invest a lot in the fortunes of our individual offspring. It means a lot to us, and it informs our intuition about how we should treat all of the things that we make. But dandelions don't really care about that. A dandelion will make 2,000 seeds and blow them into the wind, and it doesn't care where any individual seed goes. It just wants to know that every crack in every sidewalk has a dandelion growing out of it. And I don't really care if everyone who gets a copy of my work pays for it, but I do want everyone who wants to pay for my work to have the opportunity to do so. And so for me, a Creative Commons license has been very successful on that front.